Welcome to the next to last segment of this series, The Reformer. I'd like to thank my viewers. If you've watched all 10 installments up to this point, I'd like to make you an acolyte of the anti-academic movement. If you're tuning in for the first time, this is the climax of my material, in which I give the practical applications of all the subjects I've talked about. This is the longest chapter because it is loaded with information and instruction for the anti-academic citizen. There will be one further installment after this entitled The Institution of the Future. With a full case against academia under his belt, the citizen can now take this information and put it to use. This chapter will outline the path he may take to bring about a better institution and better understanding of education, although a real campaign will certainly be marked by the unique qualities of the campaigner and the circumstances he will face. One of the many questions people will ask is, how do you expect to convince people to go along with this? The answer is that support already exists. It just needs to be honed. Parents already have beef with teachers. They need only to realize they have the power to cripple the school system or make it obey their commands, if only they acted on their opinions. Teachers firmly believe their hands are tied by their superiors, which can be reason enough to go on strike or move their talents to other institutions. And intelligent citizens in general understand the difference between reality and bureaucracy, and that political motives can't be trusted. Therefore, keep citizens informed, and the snowball of political change begins to accumulate. The reformer as a citizen. In The Cry of the Student, we explored the most likely background of the anti-academic citizen. Anyone who plans to influence public opinion must first reach a decision in their own life. There are ways even a citizen with no political standing or knowledge can make contributions to begin his quest. Here are a few examples. 1. Start a group. In my original draft of this thesis, I proposed posting flyers on campus in a college town for a weekly gripe session. But now I would say start a meetup online. There are students everywhere whose trust has been broken, but are surrounded only by an academic support base. They've never been asked to share their problems and discuss solutions with people that have other grievances about the school. Members of this gathering can brainstorm ways to address these in a productive manner. What starts as a luncheon where at least one frustrated student will share his or her plight and receive sympathy leads to a common frustration with the school, and it is in this setting that the founder's doctrine can be presented. Let's say the issue is sexual harassment against students being covered up by the school. The group holds a demonstration, boycotts a certain event, class, or individual, with the message that the school itself is to blame. At some point, the initiator's first political feuds with the institution will begin, as his pamphlets are taken down and he receives derogatory mail. This fight will increase his publicity. Once something appears in the local news or by substantial word of mouth, he will draw similar attention with everything he initiates, giving the issue greater chance of being recognized. A student underground will form, passing a voice and a hope for every student who feels alone until they no longer seek counsel from the official channels at all. An anti-academic identity comes into being. People see it and know what it means. maybe a slogan or a symbol that the faculty can't get out of their sight. And the school's retaliation causes collateral damage. But the idea never goes away. The college level is the most likely place for this to succeed, as students are more independent, inclined to favor complex political issues, and are more able to help each other through clubs and representatives their own age. Anyone who founds a social group must be prepared for the effects of the message they are spreading. An anti-academic writer or speaker must know that sooner or later one of his listeners will drop out because of what he has said, and not take this decision lightly. This necessitates a vision of further steps. All students have connections outside the campus and can pool these resources in the event that the school goes too far or they just don't want to attend anymore. A halfway house would be a good thing for a reformer with the means to start on his path to greater campaigns. 2. Apply for jobs with academic requirements you don't have. By the rights of association, anyone in this country can apply for any job, just as they can quit any job. As long as applications can be mailed or placed on a counter, there is no preventing it. So the requirements for these positions are merely to persuade unqualified people from applying. It is possible to still get an interview and demonstrate your true qualifications, which are not easily dismissed as ignorance. Some people reach an age where it is more important to them to make their career choices known, regardless of what the actual chances are, than spend the rest of their life accepting the limited range of professions that has been slated for them. The objective is to show employers that respect for this system is not universal. If the response is, why would someone apply for a job they can't get? You can politely say that you thought the employer could be reasoned with. The hiring process is viewed with extreme bias for the employer, just as economics itself is a feudal system. The employer is in control, and that control is to be feared, even though any applicant is job hunting for his own purposes. The interview is a mutual exchange where scrutiny goes both ways. Even the belief that the interests of survival are a barrel every citizen can be held over would be a mistake. You could just state that you want the job anyway. People are impressed by different things, and it is those employers that the applicant must identify. The potential gain is enormous. This is not to encourage people to apply for jobs they actually aren't qualified to do. Such employment wouldn't last long, and it is up to the applicant's own volition to choose the right work and to do it well. If you are in a position to do hiring or have some kind of voice in the matter, giving non-traditional candidates a chance, even if it's just dropping a hint that you were impressed with them, changes lives and encourages people who don't have a degree to aim higher and perform better. If people representing different educational origins were more common in the workplace, it would stem the tide of coursework, scoring, and simulated exercise being forced on all employees as a screening measure. 3. Take sides in the institution's own rifts. Since I first wrote of the closing of Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, there has been a much greater closing of 50 schools in Chicago. This is a truly complex issue because parents and students in some of the most run-down schools in the country fought to defend them against the school system's own leadership. So it's not a war between ideologies, it's more like a mutiny. There are collateral achievements and spoils to be gained from such dysfunction that go completely unnoticed by either side. There is a Chicago student union now, something that didn't address student concerns before this debacle. Now they're challenging a rise in school ratings caused by the changing of growth scores of standardized tests. Imagine what these groups could accomplish aside from preserving school buildings. Gang violence is rampant in the Chicago area. Instead of students having to deal with this individually and then unknowing adults stepping in and punishing everyone, a delegation of students who understand and have a stake in this could become an actual anti-gang amongst their peers, and then someday represent their own demographic and its interests in their struggle with adults. This situation is different from the upheaval I described in Part 2 because it is not a fight against academics itself. The public is loyal in this instance, although loyal to nothing, and if successful, they would simply keep the schools under the same authority there was before. There are much smaller rifts in every school and every department that work the same way. But in this confusion, an alternative goal can be reached that doesn't even appear on other people's radar. One goal is convincing people to leave the school system. Another would be demonstrating that credentials are meaningless. In the case of the Chicago closings, one goal would be keeping schools open the school system can't afford as an instrument of its demise. Bolstering one's own approval as a public servant while putting increased pressure on school leaders until something snaps. People in desperate circumstances are more likely to listen and follow your example instead of the disobedience the school board feels toward the public now. And this can be applied to individual school circumstances to the benefit of a student or parent. Another goal would be to use the closing of a facility to get students out of an unwanted situation or tear down the disruptive behavior of one employee. You have to be careful when doing this. If students were forced to attend increasingly starved facilities and programs, that's no change from the policy that was there before. The system is designed to pass punishment down to the student, and in some ways from the leadership down to individual teachers. Reform means taking that influence away from where it is not deserved. 4, force the enemy to show its weaker side. An example of this would be a female college student who is a victim of sexual harassment defaming the school for trying to conceal the crime, and the school's backlash soils their image further. If faced with a social or technological force they can't stop, authorities will eventually become criminal themselves. An example being police brutality against protesters leading to civil rights lawsuits, or the FBI committing a cybercrime to catch a vigilante hacker. Academicians who have spent their lives riding the belief that their profession is that of a saint can be tripped up by the exposure of sins they have never considered. The ones that maintain a sterling reputation often have the most vehemence waiting to come out. And with some skill, this can be used to win arguments. 5. Reverse the process I mentioned in Part 8, where educational independence is taken from the student and passed up the academic ladder. Most citizens probably will never get the chance to pass a decision from the state to local school boards, or from the school board to the schools. But there may be opportunity to pass a decision that usually belongs to the school into the hands of students. And if it's something important to them, they may be eternally grateful for it. Here's an example. The office of principal is traditionally a disciplinary position. Most students only get to meet him and his deputies when they've done something wrong. When a student is caught spray painting or smoking in the hallway and is dealt with behind closed doors, life goes on. It doesn't affect or involve school leadership much at all. The administrative offices are more like a dungeon they are sent to. Discipline-first leadership is like using bad behavior to force people to agree with you. The principal is hardly their leader if acting like he does wouldn't be considered acceptable in most of the fields they're destined for. Instead of this, what if it was a role of benevolence where the different players are steered toward their own benefit or moral outcomes? Let's say, helping an honest student get the better of an unlikable teacher. I've seen statements that being a good student is close to godliness, that it's what Christ would do, when it would probably be more accurate to say Christ would treat everyone equally, from the valedictorian down to the lowest delinquent. Let's call this type of leadership being the soul of the school. 6. Challenge people in everyday conversation. Not in a combative or scolding manner, but as a challenge to basic beliefs, which can be polite or even humorous. Academicians are masters at using innocent lines of thought to open doors to offense. But like most people who dish it out, they can't take it in return. Catchphrases can be countered with other catchphrases. If someone mentions they have a degree, you can say, I guess one man's trash is another man's treasure. Or, all paper is the same at the bottom of the birdcage. If a conversation starts with a serious concern, you can blow it off or change the subject. Your son is failing this class can be met with, well, you could fail him, but consider blah, 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 blah. Save an issue that is sensitive to the speaker for the right moment, so they'll concentrate on your choice of words instead of what they were talking about. This is opposed to academicians silencing people with their statements. Instead of hitting people over the head with your doctrine, allude to your beliefs and make them think more. Be the one to decide where the conversation goes. 7. Deny basic support to institutions. It is probably not within the viewer's means to avoid paying taxes, but there are basic endorsements and approvals most people wouldn't think of that can be refused, such as not attending one's graduation, not standing or clapping at events, avoiding educational charities like playing the lottery. The citizen's greatest tool, the right to vote, is denied when all choices on the ballot are essentially the same. There are sometimes ways around this, however. In a school district crippled by an issue that actually threatens this union, such as racism, teacher layoffs, or school closings, one may cast a vote one way or the other that decides something not even on the agenda. Anything that goes against the grain of academic consent is profound because it is an institution that depends entirely on a treadmill. And since human beings are not factory products, ultimately doomed to sabotage. 8. Report offenses. I've included this because in the case of the boy who was chained to a front porch with a dead chicken around his neck, not only did his foster parent lose the house and her job with the county, but that committee was disbanded as a result of this incident. An unlikely turn of events that accomplished what some would consider a rare political victory. Other very simple measures would be take down academic advertising. In public places, it is usually permissible to remove offending ads, flyers, or business cards from a community kiosk, bulletin board, or table and place them in the nearest trash can. Post opinions in unusual places. There are venues which are not accustomed to receiving criticism or debate, such as posting "Save the Trees" in front of a paper mill, or "Fat is beautiful" outside a gym. Places like abortion clinics are accustomed to this, but every institution at war must be made aware that it is under siege. Most news agencies and newspapers now incorporate a forum for responses on their website, of which the first few are posted on the air. Calling radio stations on certain topics also reaches an audience. Writing and speaking engagements are a way for a reformer to spread his message in ways that may attract unique opportunities, if that is where his talent lies. The way to begin this process is by getting out and attending such gatherings and lectures. Proposals may look good on paper, but the real world is always different. An anti-academic person may have to soften his message or go for the throat, depending on the venue. The results of attracting readers or listeners are unpredictable. There may be invitations to join existing movements, publications, or projects, but let us assume there is no quick way to advance on the path toward candidacy. The small group the reformer founded expands over time. People tell their friends, and its purpose changes. Instead of being a forum for complaints, it can become an assembly of like-minded citizens with the most committed individuals occupying an inner circle and bringing the ways and means of citizenship with them. It becomes a meeting place for reformers and activists, each with their own projects which they can augment through the pooling of human resources, funds, and ideas. Enabling civil projects is the beginning of political campaigning. At first, these are as diverse as the people in attendance. One may be fighting a city statute, another may be promoting a new alternative institution. But common ground brings the promise of unity, that one cause or another will rise to the next level. Not only does this increase his chances of success, but it may point the reformer toward the goal of running for office. No matter how he gets there, whether his organization draws a national audience or an existing establishment thrusts this attention upon him, one day he finds himself in the public eye with a place to stand and focus himself, a platform. The reformer as a candidate. It may seem naive to pre-examine any political campaign in detail. But if we know the campaigner's motives and inspiration, we can have some idea of the framework this person needs in a country where anyone can run for office. This endeavor is nothing like the campaign of a traditional candidate. It is more costly, takes years of preparation, and a greater level of expertise. A typical contender for school board is running in their home state using a well-established formula. And as long as they demonstrate affinity to the academic cause or one of its factions, they have an almost guaranteed support base. The initiator, on the other hand, has no such luxuries. he is not running to deal with one local issue in his hometown, as most are conservative territory where such an attempt would be doomed to failure. A candidate who intends to win must fix his eye on a larger playing field, honing in on the district or districts in which victory is most likely. There is a difference between someone who runs as a hobby because he happens to live in a district where he can easily win, and a candidate who takes himself to where the need is most. The school board is not a men's club or PTA chapter. The reformer is a professional, going after the problem where it occurs. He must connect with the voter. Having a convincing argument may open doors where he can stress the importance and the power of voting, ally himself with organizations. To get a feel for campaigning, one should do a campaign internship or canvassing for local candidates. A professional campaigner requires a team of individuals whose talents have been assembled toward a single objective. The candidate is not the master of this enterprise, but only the most visible part of a cooperative effort that never ends. The alternative education and reform movement is the pool from which contributors can be drawn. A campaign has much more to accomplish than just the end result of the election. While a mainstream candidate's goal is to sell himself, a platform which leaves little time for the issues, an initiator may use the entire campaign season to talk a single message in as many venues as possible. Publicized visits to disgruntled students and teachers, dilapidated buildings, perhaps a forum in which their concerns are voiced on camera, drawing attention to things voters are accustomed to ignoring. The greatest opportunity to make this statement is at the debates. At the debates I have seen, which in a school board election may have a dozen contenders, several candidates attempt to restrict the dialogue to what is safe, or what can be easily explained in the time they have. But whatever unusual item stands out is what people most remember, and every speaker who follows may respond to it, scrapping what they had intended to say for something completely unexpected. In this way, whoever speaks first can set the stage and the tone of the discussion to whatever subject he wants. This is but a glimpse of the effect one anti-academic voice can have on the school board, and the answer to the question, what good is having just one vote? A school board is not like other legislative bodies. I once saw a candidate at a debate describe herself and her 5 competitors as the dream team because they were all cut from the same cloth. It looked as if they were all going to spend election night at a restaurant together watching the results come in. The political party. The role of formal schooling in the American political mind is a strange relationship that defies the rules of ordinary politics, something like the relationship between church and state. Although candidates can be defined as Republican or Democrat, there usually isn't much of a difference. The two parties don't stake much of a claim in school board issues unless there is an issue that's particularly hot. Instead, both parties try to court the same base by making promises that are almost unified in their objective, like smaller class sizes, and strive for this one prize as a matter of routine. The reason for this is that the academic doctrine gets inside the mind at a young age, whereas political identity comes much later. Some would say there is no need for the major parties to influence the school system, so students can have a balanced, unhindered choice when they reach voting age. What they don't realize is that there is a deeper political identity. People's decisions are being steered in very specific directions long before the voting age. What is needed then is a party whose doctrine applies to this deeper identity. And the political philosophy which supports this is libertarianism. Some will ask why politics should be brought into schooling at all. The answer is that school is politics, except at the moment it is a strange and undeclared form of politics. Libertarianism is the advocacy of unlimited freedom of thought, leaving people to be as they were born and allowing them to learn and live unimpeded by influence, which applies to this situation even if a particular party hasn't pursued it or people haven't named their political identity yet. The current model of public schooling is authoritarianism, the end result of which is totalitarianism. Their natural opponent is the philosophy that leaves people alone, an anti-politic. Political domination of education is not the way it should be. So in the end, politics will not be required or even noticed by the student of the future. The reformer in office. Everyone talks about public office holders as if they could do a better job themselves. I have never held public office. The reformer I suggest does not consider himself subject to the same responsibilities and qualifications as a typical candidate, but responsibilities they know nothing about. One anti-academic voice changes everything because they have never heard these arguments before. They don't know they exist. Everyone else is there to make friends and preserve, while he has chosen to surround himself with people who probably make his blood boil. Recently, the state of North Carolina decided that private school vouchers are unconstitutional, denying families the right to attend the school of their choice if they can't afford it. The superintendent of Mecklenburg County Schools, a man who was considered a visionary when he was hired, said, "Private education is an option, but we have to focus on public education." The private versus public schools debate is decades behind us. Vouchers were considered the biggest harbinger of educational change 17 years ago when I was writing the first draft of this paper. Revoking them takes us back to the way things were pre-1997, when there weren't laptops in the classroom, instead of pursuing the multitude of educational directions and theories that exist right now. I should note that 1 month after he said this, the superintendent quit his office over allegations that he was verbally abusive to his staff. At the time, I first mentioned the couple who said extreme behavior calls for extreme measures, and suggested the superintendent of schools might say the same thing. I had no way of knowing this would happen so soon. Here is a small sample of considerations for the reformer who successfully places into the school board. In a previous segment, I suggested that the problems inherent to public schooling that consistently make headlines cannot be solved because the solutions exist outside the school system, and some would consider pursuing them an act of disloyalty, and that the initiator should offer these solutions in exchange for some of the spoils of the school system. Another means that makes these issues obsolete would be appealing to the state. Now, it may be unrealistic for a minority representative to propose radical changes and expect even a local body to vote in favor. But that is not what I propose. What I propose is a boycott. Any heated issue where people have been slighted produces a wave of supporters whom the reformer is not going to ask to respect whatever legislation comes down, but drives the issue until they leave the school system, entering alternative programs prepared in advance by a provider that has sponsored this entire plan. If properly employed, there is no problem within academia that can't be eliminated. Now, this is different from a strike. The purpose of a strike is for teachers to eventually go back to work under better conditions. With a union that can fully control and manipulate the school system, citizens would no longer have any reason to accept failure. In other words, promoting alternative education will help school supporters to gain complete control over their institution. In this way, he acts as a conductor directing these groups to the right education provider. Ultimately, these avenues will form a network connecting the entire educational community so that everyone has available alternatives at all times. Some would claim this is how it already works, since citizens have the freedom to choose whatever form of education they want. But students are not citizens. Opportunities must be numerous and redundant for these choices to filter down within a student's grasp. A reformer with something of value to offer the academic majority may find that their promises in exchange for this are mere speculation. The school system specializes in receiving support that can't be taken back, while the service offered in return evaporates into smoke. It is speculation because they don't know why they're being asked for these things, or what the value might be. So they are certainly not naturally inclined to make good on them. They believe support is deserved and don't understand why it is not being given for free. If they entertain the reformer's plan at all, it is merely so they can acquire what they need as quickly as possible. Therefore, a reformer must exchange his vote for something that has corporal effect on a real student. An example of this would be asking for 10 additional names to be added to a group being rewarded for academic achievement, either by essay or lottery. Although it may not seem like much of a change, for our purposes, this would allow some students to skip over the traditional means, a step on the road to making those means irrelevant. Taking resources away from schools must be done with great care because, as always, students will be the ones to suffer, while the architects of the programs go unscathed. This is how the system works. Instead, deprive the school system of what it values most, its influence. With this measure, the only way students are affected is by the removal of the program entirely. Certainly, funds will be diverted, but because the people are choosing to no longer invest and allow these programs, not leaving them to persist in a debilitated state. Only condemning the process to begin again leaves no stone unturned. Reconstructing the school system. A restructuring of the old system and the way it operates is a critical part of the reform process. Many points in this doctrine seem committed to damage the system to make a whole large enough to work with, but a plan for stability in the end with a new system in place is as important a factor as the means to make it happen. Forgiveness has to be a part of the plan of anyone who believes what they're doing is right and good. Since this segment is running long, I'm adding a final installment to give an idea of what this end product might look like. Stay tuned for the institution of the future.